Welcome to the Arun Church podcast, where our mission is bringing life to everyone, everywhere, every day. Each podcast episode features the latest talk from our church, which are released weekly. We're passionate about Jesus, love to worship together, and are committed to changing our community for the better. Connect with us at arunchurch.com. So pleased that we have got Jules here. This is Jules Jacobs, everybody. Let's give her a round of applause, shall we? We're going to find out a whole lot more about Jules as we go through this evening. It's actually the first time I've properly met Jules myself, so it's going to be a really great evening. I know that she's got so much to bring us. And I know she's just experienced anxiety firsthand, and I know that it's going to be a really great evening. So thank you, everybody, for coming. What we're going to do is this. We're going to talk together. I'll interview her. I've got some questions here. So we're going to go through those questions, and Jules is going to expand on those things. And then at the very end, we're going to say, anybody got any questions? Aren't we? It's going to be fun. So if some of your questions from this evening, I mean, I don't know, some of you are here because I know that you will suffer from anxiety. Some of you know people that suffer from anxiety, and some of you just want to come here and support those people. Some of you maybe are a bit of all of those, So we just want to learn as best as we can as a community. That's why it's tackling anxiety together. It's not somebody on their own working things through. We want to, as a community, support each other in any way that we can. And so that's really why we wanted to do this evening. I think that after the pandemic, more than any other time, people have said to me, people will say, I'm anxious about coming to church, I'm anxious about this, I'm anxious about this. And I thought, right, we need to get together as a community. We need to explore this together and see how we can help each other. So that's why we've got everybody together this evening. So, Jules, thank you, first of all, so much for coming. Just tell me a bit before. I'd really love to hear your story. We would really love to hear your story. But tell us a little bit, first of all, about you, who you are, where do you come from, family, that sort of thing.
Great. Well, thanks, first of all, for having me. My name's Jules, short for Julia. And I was born in Manchester a long, long time ago. And I then moved to London. Sounds like I'm going to do my whole life story. I was born and then I was a teenager. And then I moved to London in my early 20s. I've done various jobs, different jobs over the years. I used to work in hospitality for a long time in nightclubs and bars and restaurants and things like that. Then I was brought up in a Christian family. And then kind of went away from the Lord, came back to God, and did various jobs, and ended up being a youth pastor for a number of years at Holy Trinity Brompton up in London. Met my husband there, Ben, and we then had 2 children. And then 13 years ago, we moved down from London to Brighton to be part of the St Peters Church plans there. And and I've now got 3 children. Got Charlie, who's 16, he's just doing his GCSEs, which is very exciting in our house in the world at the moment. Then Florrie, who's 14, and then Joey, who is 8. And that's a little bit about me so far.
Fantastic. So tell us a bit about your story and why you feel so passionately about this. I know you've written a course because you feel passionately about this, but just tell us your story.
Okay, so first of all, I want to say for anybody who's here and is come here tonight and has anxiety, and it's been quite a big step for you coming, thank you first of all for coming. It's amazing that you're here, and that's sometimes the bravest step you can do is kind of start talking about suffering from anxiety. And I wouldn't want you to feel you had to stay in the room. If you didn't feel as though you wanted to, you can get up and leave at any time you want at all. because I know what it feels like to suffer from anxiety and panic attacks. So I would say that I first probably recognized that I was suffering from panic and anxiety in my early 20s. Before that, I can't say that I've got a really great family life. As I said, I was in a Christian family. No major events gone wrong in my life. The only thing I knew that I would do was I would be very analytical. I would analyze what I was thinking or what I was saying a lot of the time. But then in my early 20s, what seemed out of nowhere was that I had a panic attack. And I didn't know what was happening to me. And it was a very scary thing. And from that moment, I remember feeling like a trap door had opened in my mind. And all the thoughts, the scary thoughts that I could have, I couldn't keep them at bay. It felt, and I was constantly worrying about the fact that I might have another panic attack. So what then happened after that was I used to avoid any situations that I thought could bring on panic. So I was living in London at the time, and one of those places that I found that I couldn't do was go on the tube. So I would avoid going on the tube. And then I would avoid going in lifts. And then I avoided flying. And then anything that I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to bring on some panic or fear or worry, I'm going to avoid it. And at the same time, I was, as I said, a youth pastor at HDB. And so at the time, I was feeling really hypocritical because I was talking to all these kids about knowing Jesus and how amazing he is and how he can set us free from all these different things that hold us back. But I was really suffering myself. And I remember trying to talk to a couple of people about it, and people would just look at me kind of blankly, and I'd be like, yeah, I just have this kind of overwhelming feeling sometime, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And I don't remember meeting anyone at that time who had the same feelings that I had. So I thought there was something very deeply wrong with me. I thought I was kind of living two lives. From the outside, everybody thought, oh yeah, she's really confident. She's doing this job. She's got, she's happily married. And then went on to have children. But I did inside. I felt as though I was one thing on the outside, but inside my thoughts were just becoming more and more negative as time went on. And I avoided reading anything about anxiety and panic because I thought that's going to bring it on. I avoided talking to anybody after a little while because I thought there's something wrong with me. And I would get prayer. I would go to church. I would get people to pray for me. I definitely would feel a sense of relief. But then a couple of days later, I would feel exactly the same again. And I would be like, there's something really wrong with me. This went on for a number of years, probably from the age of about 23 to about 32. And after I'd had my second child, Florrie, I remember feeling very, very unwell. I'd probably had gone into something called generalized anxiety disorder. So it wasn't specific situations that were making me feel anxious anymore, but I would just genuinely feel very anxious. So and that would translate itself in that I would get angry very quickly. I'd be quite controlling in my behavior. My self-esteem was on the floor. And I just, and I honestly at that point thought, I'm going mad, there's something really wrong with me. And I pray at that point, and I'd done this a number of times over the years, but I really prayed and I said, God, you need to show me what's going on here. I have no idea how to get out of this. I had a really supportive husband, but he didn't understand what was going on either. And I remember reading one day a verse from Romans 12, verses 1 and 2, and it says, don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but let God transform you by changing the way that you think. Now, that's in the Living Translation. And I remember this thing of changing the way that you think, kind of jumping out at me from the Bible. And I kind of thought, there's something really key about this verse, but I don't know what it actually means. And this verse came up in like my Bible reading later on in the day, and then somebody else quoted it to me the day after. And then the day after that, I went to go and see a doctor who, for the first time, about anxiety. And this guy had been recommended to me by a friend. And I went into the doctor's office and I basically just was like, this is what's going on. I tried to explain everything that was going on. I was, having a panic attack myself. And he just sat and he just listened and he said to me, Jules, you know what you need to do? And I was like, yeah, just tell me, I want to know. And he says, you need to change the way that you think. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is what I'd read in the Bible literally 48 hours earlier. And for the first time in probably about 10 years, I felt as though a light bulb had gone on and there was hope in this situation, that I didn't have to stay like I had been for the last 10 years. So immediately he referred me to a cognitive behavioural therapist, which I'll talk a little bit about later, who really helped me, particularly with the panic side of anxiety and kind of going through my thoughts. And then I also went on medication for a little while as well, which helped me bring me down a little bit from the high state of anxiety that I was in. And I got better from that pretty quickly because I was like, oh my goodness, there's a way out. And I read a really great book called From Panic to Power. I highly recommend it. That was brilliant about panic attacks and things like that. And so I got better really, really quickly. And then I became quite vocal about panic and anxiety because I was like, I know there's a way out. This is great. So I did lots of kind of talks at church about it and all that kind of stuff. But then I felt as though I could keep falling back into these negative thought patterns. And so it would kind of feel like I was going forward, then going down, then going forward, then going down, going forward, going down. And I remember somebody saying to me very early on when I first started getting better, they said, so what are you going to do when you dip again? And I was like, I was offended. I was offended by them saying this because I was like, oh no, don't make me feel anxious about feeling anxious again. But I knew what they meant by kind of saying you need to keep renewing your mind. So after that, I was left on my own for a little bit after doing the CBT and came off anxiety medication after about 2 years. Which I found very, very helpful. It was very, very, as in the medication was really, really helpful. It really got me on an even keel. And the doctor says it's like stabilizers on the bike because you need to learn how to ride the bike again and stuff. And then after that, I found that I did have little dips. But what was incredible was that God always brought into my life either somebody or something or a Bible verse or a talk or a book or something that would help me almost break through to the next, what felt like the next level or a new area of freedom. So it's like this renewing of the mind is a constant thing. And I still am renewing my mind all the time in how can I bring it into a much more healthy place. And probably about really feeling that I wanted to help other people with anxiety because I know what it feels like. I know what a torment it is, and I used to talk to a lot of people about it, and they said, well, why don't you put something together? So about 4 or 5 years ago, I started the beginnings of this course, Tackling Anxiety Together, and just started it in my living room, and then it's grown quite a lot since then. We did loads of stuff over lockdown, online, and things like that. But I would say that what I've learned through that time is that there is a way out of anxiety. We can really help ourselves, that there's so much that God can help us with. He really wants us to bring us into a place of well-being and being free from this stuff. But also it's a journey. So it's not like I would say I'm totally free from anxiety forever, but I know now the skills that I have and the tips I need to move away from it.
Sorry, I'm so caught up with your story that I've forgotten what I'm doing. Okay, so a lot of people often ask what causes anxiety. Is there something wrong with me if I feel anxious?
Right, yeah, this is one of the questions that used to go round in my mind all the time. Is there something really flawed about me because I've got anxiety? I'm married to someone who is super laid back and nothing seems to faze him at all. And so, which is great in many ways, but in other ways it made me feel even more kind of like there's something really wrong with me. Gosh, this he seems to be all fine. Everybody else seems to be all fine. Nobody else is talking to me about anxiety. This was early days. And I really felt ashamed about being anxious. Now, I just want to say there is not something deeply wrong with you because you have anxiety. In fact, when I started reading about tackling anxiety and tackling panic, I read this really encouraging book, which I've already quoted, called From Panic to Power. And she says, if you've suffered, this is a lady called Lucinda Bassett, who's suffered herself from anxiety and panic attacks. She wrote this book alongside a clinical psychologist, and she said that she found from all her studies and the things that she looked into is that if you suffered from more than the average amount of anxiety, you were actually a really incredible person. Which I was like, oh, great, that's brilliant. Why are we so incredible? And she says often that they find that people who suffer from anxiety have highly active imaginations. We're usually above average in intelligence. We're very empathetic and we're very sensitive and we're problem solvers. But what we can do is sometimes use these incredible gifts that we've been given and we're turning them round in on themselves. So in case, instead of imagining the best case scenario, we imagine the worst case scenario. Instead of using our problem solving skills, we overanalyze and mull problems over in our mind. And all that kind of stuff. And when we're empathetic and sensitive, sometimes that side of us can make us feel quite vulnerable. And so just want to encourage you with that straight away, start off with that there is not something deeply wrong with us if we suffer from anxiety. Most people do at some point in our lives. Sometimes it's because of nature, it could be because of our physiology, that we actually have, some of us are just a little bit more reactive in our systems. I remember going to see the psychologist very early on, and he said, most people go along in life like this. So their lives are kind of like a graph, a little bit like this. And a challenge comes along, and their adrenaline levels, or the way that they get themselves prepared for a challenge, just has a little spike, and then it goes back down again. But some of us, just because of our genetic makeup, we just react quicker. We just tend to be a little bit more emotional. We can get more excited. We can feel more joyful. We can feel all those great things. But we sometimes can have much bigger reaction to fear, or much bigger reaction to a problem and things like that. So that's sometimes some of us just have that in us. Sometimes it's because of nurture. Sometimes it's because we've been in families that are worriers. Maybe you've had a parent who's a worrier, or a situation where or an event that your family has gone through, which has caused quite a bit of issues in your family. So sometimes it's because of that. Sometimes it's because of situations that you've been through or circumstances that you've been through recently. Sometimes it's because, so it's nature, a bit of nurture. It could be both. It could be just that you've had a bad experience, or you have a phobia about something. So there's a lot of different things that cause anxiety. But all of us, as humans, have something inside of us called the stress response, which I'm sure some of you have already heard about, which helps us to look after ourselves and to meet challenges. So our stress response, what it does is it kicks in if we're about to face a challenge or if we're in a dangerous situation. So say, for example, you're walking down the road, it's really windy, and a branch falls off a tree. Your body, your stress response immediately kicks in. So you end up jumping out the way to get out of the way of the branch that's coming down. So without us even realizing it, our brains will have noticed the danger, and then the other side of our fight or flight jump kicks in, and there's a part of our brain called the amygdala which produces this adrenaline response. So that's the brain produces the adrenaline. It goes to our muscles, it speeds up our hearts, it speeds up our breathing. So it enables us to jump out of the way, and then also we become very focused on the problem. So your brain and your thoughts will be very much focused on the fact that I need to get away from this branch that's about to fall down on us. And so that's what all of us have within us, something called the stress response. If we don't have that, we would not be able to get ourselves away from dangerous situations, and also we wouldn't feel ready to be able to face challenges. So athletes use the stress response to get themselves all psyched up for running a race. So they'll jump up and down, they'll try and get all the blood to their muscles, their heartbeat is racing, it's adrenaline that's pushing through around their body. They use that to make themselves run faster and do a better job. people use the stress response when they're really focusing on a challenge. So a surgeon will use their stress response to really focus in on just thinking about what they have to do when they're doing their surgery. They block out everything else that's around them so that they can really focus on what they need to do. So this stress response is brilliant, and we need it, and we can't live without it. However, what happens sometimes is that when we get anxious, our stress response doesn't get switched off. Because our anxiety doesn't always come through the circumstances that we're facing. It comes through the way we perceive the circumstances that we're facing, the way we think about what's coming up. A lot of our anxiety is based on things that may or may not happen in the future, rather than what's gone in the past so much, but really you're thinking about what happens if. What happens if I lose my job? What happens if that relationship breaks down? What happens if I don't have enough money? What happens if I go into that party and I feel as though I can't talk to anyone? For me, it was like, what happens if I get on a tube and I have a panic attack? What happens if? All of those things. So that's when anxiety comes, and we, in our minds, what we're doing is we're trying to make ourselves safe by thinking about it. We're kind of analysing it. What can we do if this happens? So I would always think, for me, would be like, I need to be near a hospital. What happens if I have a panic attack? I need to be near a hospital, which then kind of would lead me to the fact that I didn't want to be too far away from the hospital just in case I had a panic attack. But that was my perception. It wasn't the reality that I couldn't control what was going on around me, or I couldn't, live without a hospital, but my perception was that I needed to be near a hospital. So when we're anxious, what we're doing is, or what we're doing, when we're thinking negatively or consistently mulling over these problems in our minds, or thinking about something that's coming up that's going to scare us, we're getting our bodies into this fight or flight response before the actual event even happens, because what we think has an effect of what's going on in our bodies. It really kind of can cause our heart rate to quicken without actually being in that situation. We can feel a little bit sick, or we can feel tense because we're thinking about it, even though we're not actually in it. So we literally, through anxiety, we can working ourselves up, and therefore we're making this stress response go round and round and round and round. Our bodies then go into this super vigilant state where we feel like everything becomes a bit of a challenge. We don't feel as though we're up to stuff. Sometimes we can feel overtired. Sometimes we can feel like we have no energy for something, or we literally can't do it, or all the things that you could put with anxiety. That is because we've been thinking about it and we've been working it up in our brains. And actually, what's interesting is, one of the things that I read is that our brains every thought in our brain is like a tree. And it's can be a very real thing to us. Every single one of us has a different thought that's going into our minds every single day. And we'll have some thoughts that are really ingrained in there, that have been there since childhood. And they're really well established. And we can have positive thoughts and we can have negative thoughts. A lot of worrying is negative thoughts, because we're not problem solving. We're just thinking negative thoughts because we're thinking of what could go wrong all the time. And a negative thought looks very different from a positive thought. So a positive thought just looks like a normal kind of branch on a tree. However, a negative thought has little toxins on the end of them. They have like little, so neuroscientists have recognized this, that they have little kind of, there's like a little bud on the end of them that has toxins on them. And when we think those thoughts, and the more we do think negatively, the more these kind of toxins grow, they then release more and more kind of toxins into our bodies, and making us feel, as I said, on edge, making us feel like, oh gosh, there's something really bad's going to happen. There's a sense of impending doom. And they really have an effect on our bodies. And we notice them more sometimes rather than our positive thoughts. And sometimes what happened particularly with me is that I felt as though the negative thoughts particularly overtook the positive thoughts. I always kind of used to see it as two sides of the brain, and that basically the negative thoughts, because I was constantly worrying about the what ifs, what could go wrong, like it was becoming like a muscle that was working overtime, and it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the positive side of the brain was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then obviously the bigger muscle was taking over the smaller muscle, and my perspective on things was getting totally out of whack because I had all these negative thoughts going around in my mind. And I was like, okay, great, well, if we have these negative thoughts, are they stuck in there for good? Is there anything we can do to change them? Because it doesn't sound great to have all these negative thoughts in your mind the whole time. And actually, this neuroscientist, Dr. Caroline Leaf, some of you may have heard of her, she's a Christian neuroscientist, she's amazing. She says you can actually change your thoughts. She says by putting in new information, by purposely choosing not to keep focusing on the negative all the time, not having to know the outcome all the time, not kind of going, right, I'm going to buy into the what-if scenario or imagining everything that could go wrong. You can start to, putting new thoughts in and new skills in, you can start to take the toxins off the tree, and you can build in new thoughts over the old thoughts, and then that new thought becomes like second nature to you, and then you're basically building up the positive side, and your perspective starts to change. So the good news is that it's that very long answer to a short question is there's not something deeply wrong with us if we have anxiety. You may have had some awful things happen to you. We all have, and I'm very sorry that we have, and unfortunately that's sometimes life. But that doesn't mean we have to stay in those places. We can change our thoughts. We can renew our minds, as the Bible says, and as we change our thoughts, we then can change our behaviors, and we often then change our feelings.
Brilliant. Wow. We have got the questions on the back here, and I'm just warning the guys at the back, we've changed the order of the questions. So just in case you get muddled up. But this second question is, how do I manage situations that make me feel anxious or cause panic attacks?
Okay, so this is going to be a very broad brushstroke answer to this question, because this can obviously, we all have different things that make us feel anxious. But there are a couple of things that are really great to keep in your mind. First of all, we have to recognize that not all our thoughts and our perceptions and our feelings about certain things are true. When I was really anxious, I used to think that everything I thought that was scary was true. And I'd look at people and go, how are you not seeing this as being scary? What's wrong with you? What I'm thinking is true, and what you're thinking isn't true. And then I realized that not all I'm thinking is true, and not all my perceptions are right. I'm sometimes wearing a filter that certainly isn't helping me. So we can start to question the thoughts. So say, for example, who has ever been in that situation where you're waiting at home and maybe your friend or your partner or your child is late home from the event that they're meant to be home. They said they were going to be home by 7. It's 7:05 and they're not home. It's 7:05 and you're kind of going, oh, okay, well, it's only 7:05. He'll be fine. A little bit like you tonight, wondering when I was going to turn up. Oh, it'll be fine. But then it gets to 7:10. And without even realizing, you're starting to imagine all the worst case scenarios of what might have happened to that person. You know, they might have run over, they might have been kidnapped, something terrible might have happened to them. And we almost can't help but think all these worst case scenarios. And I certainly can still sometimes buy into them, particularly regarding my children. But then you can start to question those thoughts and kind of go, okay, they have been late before. And sometimes, and most of the time, 9.9% of the time, it's always been fine. They always turn up. So you can start talking yourself down from the negative thought or the negative imagination. Did anything ever go really wrong? You can say to yourself. And even if it did really go wrong, I'm still here and I'm living to tell the tale. Talk to yourself in a comforting way. Kind of talk to yourself down. Whatever it is that's causing you to feel anxious, talk yourself down and says, it will be okay. I will be okay. I've lived to what I've just said. Basically, I'm still here. I've managed to get through this situation. My partner, my spouse, my friend, they've always come home. Or, do you know what I'm trying to say? So you're starting to question those thoughts and those perceptions. A practical rule I always use now about if I'm worrying about something, is because worry is a habitual thing, and some of us love to worry. We just do. It's like, I remember somebody explaining, worrying is a little bit like a rocking chair. You feel as though you're going somewhere, but you're actually just staying in the same place the whole time. Worrying is quite similar. It feels similar to problem solving, and there's a real gain in problem solving. A lot of us here probably are problem solvers, and we like to work out how we're going to work out a situation. However, it doesn't work when we can't work out how to change the situation. So when we're worrying, one of the first things I will use, and I found really helpful, is, can I do anything about this situation? First and foremostly, can I do anything about this situation? Sometimes we like to sit there and we know we can do something about it, but we procrastinate, or we make excuses, or we don't feel as though we want to do it, or we're just going to sit here and put it off till another day. We have to start saying to ourselves, no, I'm going to do something about this, because you're taking control of the situation. So you say, can I do anything about this thing that I'm worrying about? If you can, go and do something about it. Do something about it immediately if you can do. If it's you need to call a friend to apologise, do that. If you're worrying about your health, go and speak to the doctor about it, but also then go, actually, how can I make my body more healthy? If it's about money, go and speak to your bank manager or an accountant, or work out a budget. All those things, rather than just sitting on it and worrying about it and procrastinating and putting it off. I used to do that all the time, and it never, ever helps. And one thing that somebody else who came on the course told me, which was really helpful, that mood follows action. So when you do something that's positive, your mood will change. Whereas if we're sat there just worrying about something, we're just going in a spiral of negativity, and it makes us feel worse, and we've not actually done anything positive. So can you do anything about it? Talk yourself down from certain situations. Talk to yourself like a friend would talk to you. Comfort yourself. Remember that you have got through certain situations before. We are still here to tell the stories about it. And take control of the situation. If it's something that we can't do anything about, first of all, again, it's the same kind of rule. Am I imagining that this is something that could go wrong? And do I actually factually know that it's going to go wrong? So if you can't say, yes, this is factually going to go wrong, what's the point in sitting there thinking about it and imagining how wrong it could go all the time? I remember in London thinking about going on I used to avoid going on planes. I used to hate going on planes, really hate them. In fact, I avoided flying for a number of years. And I would sit there working myself up for ages and ages, thinking about how awful it would be if I panicked on the plane. So by the time I'd worked up all this kind of energy inside of me, negative energy, by the time I even got to the airport, I was in a little bit of a state, because I was imagining how bad it was going to be. And then I remember the cognitive behavioural therapist saying, don't project ahead, just stay in the moment. So kind of go, right, we'll talk a little bit about this a little bit later, about Jesus saying not worry about tomorrow, but just stay in the present rather than imagining what could go wrong in the future. And then, if you can't do anything about the situation, first of all, pray about it. I mean, I know a lot of us here have a faith. This is what prayer's so great for. You can kind of go, I'm going to lay this burden down. For those of us who don't pray, you could just go, I'm going to write it down on a piece of paper, and I'm going to put it somewhere else. I'm going to physically lay this burden down. I'm going to not keep focusing on it the whole time. And then distract yourself. Go off and do something else. Because the more we kind of spend thinking about it, the bigger it gets. But if you go off and distract yourself and learn how to distract yourself by doing different things, you can minimize the size of the problem. Also ask yourself these questions as well. When I'm feeling worried or anxious, am I tired? We can feel really much worse than when we're tired or at night time than we do during the day. I never kind of try and work out problems late at night, because I know that if I'm tired, it's all out of proportion. I will say, I'll wait till tomorrow morning. Am I hungry? Some of us are really affected by missing a meal. You know, our blood sugar levels can go up and down the whole time. Am I tired? Am I hungry? Have I drank something or eaten something that's got caffeine in, or a lot of sugar, or something that's just making me feel a bit, You know, learn to see the signs in your body. Caffeine in particular can spike us and make us feel all out of whack. So if you think about something, our bodies, might be a bit negative, if we've drank caffeine or alcohol or anything like that, our bodies have a much bigger physical reaction than we would do if we hadn't eaten or drank those kind of things. Have I watched or read something that's scary? I mean, the news today is super, super, super negative. So sometimes if we're consuming that all the time, it again puts us in this vigilant state. Do I need to take a break from watching the news the whole time? Do I need to stop watching suspense thrillers or scary movies for a little bit? Because some of us, again, are more reactive to those kind of things. Am I hormonal? Sorry to throw that in, but am I hormonal? You know, is again for 50% of us in this room, our hormones change all the time, and we need to recognise that there may be times that we feel a little bit more reactive than others. So that's first of all, that's a kind of very simple checklist of how do we manage if we're worrying about something. Can we do something about it? Do something about it. Take action. Pray about it, then make sure you distract yourself, and then go through that checklist. Am I hungry? Am I tired? All that kind of stuff, which I've just literally said. So I imagine some of you here might have had panic attacks, some of you might not. Some of us have them, some of us don't. And what they basically are, we can have a strong physiological reaction to stress. Or that we might have a phobia about something. So it's exactly what you would get with adrenaline if you are getting yourself ready for a challenge, but we might sometimes get beating heartbeats randomly, we might get sweaty hands, our breathing might go a little bit shallower, we might feel a bit sick, we might feel out of control in our thinking, all of those things. The good news is about panic attacks, they're one of the easiest or most simple things to deal with, because we can learn how to manage them. It was one of the things that really, really affected me. And then when I learned a couple of skills, very quickly I was like, okay, I can take control of my body. So first of all, when you're having a panic attack, which is feeling on edge and feeling a bit like I want to run away from this situation or whatever, what you can do is you can start to say, this is adrenaline that's going through my body now. For some reason, it's just going off. I don't always know why. But it will calm down. Our brain can't just keep shooting it out all the time. Adrenaline will calm down. So with a stress response, what happens is it goes along, it has a spike to be able to meet the challenge, and then our body goes back to homeostasis afterwards. So talk to yourself, I will calm down. I'm not going to die. No one's ever died from a panic attack. I'm going to be okay. Again, talking yourself down. Sometimes when we're feeling panicky, we're a little bit like a car that's has its engine in high gear. We're revving quite a lot. You know, we're like, we've got to go somewhere. If you can go somewhere, that's quite a good thing to do. I'm not saying run away from a situation, but for me, sometimes at home, I'd just get this kind of panic out of nowhere. When I'd read a couple of books and learned a couple of skills, I was like, okay, this is adrenaline and this is energy. I started looking at it in a different way. This is energy that I've got now. Maybe I can use this energy for a positive thing rather than sitting trying to work out what's wrong with me. So I would go, right, okay, I'm just going to go and do some cleaning, or I'm just going to go and do a workout, or I'm just going to go and write something, or I'm just going to do something else. And now you started to see this kind of energy as a positive thing, and I still do now sometimes. I kind of go, actually, this is a positive thing, and it distracts you from the scariness of it as well. It makes you feel a lot less scary. Then also, with your brain will want to kind of focus in on trying to find the thing that is scary. And most of the time, the thing that, or the place that you're in, is not necessarily scary. It's just your perception of it. So I know a lot of you probably do go on tubes or buses or trains or whatever, and you'll be like, I'm totally relaxed on this train. But I would have been sat there kind of going, sweaty hands and all sorts of things. And it was because my perception was wrong. So what you need to not do is buy into what your perception is telling you. You can look around and say, nobody else is running out of the room. There's not a fire or, they're all coping with it. So rationally, normally, this is an okay, safe place to be. So what you can do is just talk yourself down from that and kind of go, okay, right, I'm not going to focus on this. Distraction is another thing that's really helpful. Distraction is king in regarding managing anxiety and worry at times. What can you distract yourself with? Can you read something? Can you sing a song? Can you watch a film that's like fun, light? Can you do kind of breathing exercises? There's lots of brilliant breathing exercises out there that you can breathe in. You can actually physically slow your heart rate down by doing these breathing exercises as well. One of the things that you can do very simply is a grounding exercise where you're literally kind of going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and counting backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just using your fingers like this. Sometimes I'll do that on the side of my leg sometimes. And what you're doing, you're interrupting all those racing thoughts because you're counting backwards and you can't think when you have to think about counting backwards. So you could just do that and just let yourself calm down, let the adrenaline calm down. Talk out loud to yourself. Use positive affirmations. Obviously, perhaps quieter if you're in a room full of people. But I used to say to myself, look, I'm not having this anymore. I'm not letting this fear control me anymore. Now, I have adrenaline all running around my body, but I felt as though I was doing something powerful by saying it. And you can't actually think something opposite while saying something positive out loud. So say things out loud to yourself. I'm stronger than this. I can get through this. I'm going to be all right. I'm not going to have this anymore. This is not who I am. All of those things. Bible verses, amazing Bible verses you can use, over and over again. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I've got this strength inside me. All of those things. So that's a good way to manage panic attacks. And actually, the more you manage them, the more you realize that you can handle yourself in the situations that might cause you panic. So for me now, I do fly, I do go on tubes, I do all the things that I avoided before. Not saying that every now and then I get a little bit like, oh, okay, this is like bringing on the adrenaline. But I know through experience that I've got through it and I can do it again and it's fine and it's not something to be scared of any longer. So the more you face that, particularly with guarding panic attacks and avoiding certain situations, the more you kind of get tips and learn how to deal with it, the more you realize that you can manage it and you will be okay. And then those panic attacks start to disappear because you're like, oh, okay, I can manage this now, I'm fine. Okay?
Jules, what are the positive ways to build a sense of well-being?
Right, so it's really important to not make anxiety the biggest thing in your life. For me, I was always like, I just want to stop feeling anxious. I just want to stop feeling anxious. So if I felt anxious, I'd feel better. But actually, that was a little bit like cart before the horse or horse before the cart. It was basically, no, that's the first one. The first one was right. Basically, one of the things that we need to do is build up our well-being. And when we're building up our well-being, again, the anxiety goes down. It's like working that positive and negative muscle. So there are many different ways to build up our well-being. You can look online. There's something the NHS have done. It's called 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which is very easy to find on any website. You can find not any website, but if you just put that in Google, you'll find it. Where do we start? So there's so many things we can do. One of the first things that you might notice when you feel anxious or low is that our mornings are not great. So you may wake up and feel like, oh, another day. Oh, I've got to go to work today. Oh, no, And then you find that you have these sabotaging thoughts almost immediately coming into your mind. And you're lying there and you're basically talking yourself out of not getting out of bed. And how many times did I stay in bed? Lots of times because I would be just sitting there mulling over these sabotaging thoughts. There's an amazing lady called Mel Robbins. Some of you may have heard of her. She's an American author and motivational speaker, and she talks about the 5-second rule. And she always says, when you wake up in the morning, set your alarm, wake up in the morning and get out of bed as soon as your alarm goes off, because your sabotaging thoughts will come in almost immediately. Give yourself 5 seconds, count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then get up and go and do what you're going to do. Go and have a shower. Take things in small incremental steps. So rather than seeing the whole day as a big block, kind of go, I can get up, I can go and have a shower. And then you out the sabotaging thoughts a little bit by every little action that you're taking. So first things first, don't give in to the sabotaging thoughts first thing in the morning. Maybe even put affirmations next to your bed so you've got them all around you, so you know that you've got these things that are going to encourage you. Have some great music on first thing, or whatever that might be. And I hate to say it, but exercise is amazing for well-being. It really, really boosts our self-esteem. It really, really manages all the adrenaline can be going around in our body. It doesn't have to be anything extraordinary. Going for walks, getting outside, getting out in nature, breathing deeply. Breathing exercises are amazing. There's a guy called Wim Hof. Don't know whether you've heard of him. He's got a program on BBC. Is it BBC Two at the moment? It's the ice challenge.
The one he goes in the ice.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, so that you can build up to that. But he's got these really great breathing techniques, and he's really kind of tapped into something which I kind of feel like it's to do with the breath of God, but he never quite kind of says that's about God. But I feel as though it is. He's got. I would highly recommend that Wim Hof breathing exercises. He has a beginning guide and things like that. And breathing well really helps us with our sense of well-being. Eating well, again, avoiding caffeine, alcohol, sugar, all of those things that can cause us to have these kind of spiky moods and things like that. Just putting a few bits more healthy stuff in your diet really helps. Learning to know yourself. Find out what you actually enjoy doing. I've spoken to a lot of Christians, and I'm not saying any of you are like this, but a lot of Christians don't always know what they enjoy doing. Because we're often kind of like, we're serving God, and we're doing this and all that kind of stuff, that we forget that God's actually made us individually, and He's put gifts and talents and things inside of us that are there because to make us individual, and are there because He wants us to enjoy life. And we need to learn how to understand ourselves and what we enjoy doing. If you don't know what you enjoy doing, purposely go and find out what it is. If you do, brilliant. And then make sure you're putting it into your week. It's not all about hard work and trying harder all the time. When we do something that we enjoy, we're boosting endorphins and all the lovely serotonin, all the things that we need in our lives to help us to boost our well-being. Gratitude, being thankful for the things that we have. That helps us focus on the good stuff that we have in our lives. Really, really good to do that. Set yourself challenges. Now you must think, well, I've got anxiety. Anxiety is enough of a challenge, thank you. I don't want to have any more challenges. This is where you've been managing life with anxiety, and that is a challenge enough, and you've been doing so well. And you're here. We're all still here. That is an amazing. You are stronger than you think you are because you've been managing that. However, why don't we shift our focus and go? Let's do challenges that are going to benefit my well-being, because when we make ourselves do difficult things, our brains produce endorphins that kind of boost our self-esteem, that make us feel really good about ourselves. So is there something that you would like to challenge yourself in? Maybe you want to learn the piano. Maybe you want to learn another language. Maybe you want to do a 5K run. Maybe you want to learn any new skill. Maybe you want, whatever it is, set yourself that challenge. Maybe I want to be grateful for 10 days on the run, and I'm going to make sure that I write down a gratitude list. It doesn't need to be something really amazing, but it's or something like, wow, I'm going to climb Everest. But it's something that is something that you wouldn't normally do, and it's a challenge. But when you accomplish it, the feeling that you get is amazing. It gives you such a boost, and it builds your self-esteem. And again, it makes you feel like I can take on life. And again, the anxiety goes down a little bit more. And celebrate your accomplishments. No matter what it is, no matter how small it is, we need to be starting to be delighted with ourselves for whatever it may be. So when I was really bad, I kind of almost got agoraphobic. I didn't even like going out the house. I remember it being a big deal for me to actually go to the post office to go and get a stamp. That was my challenge for that day. And I remember getting the stamp, coming back down and going, bought myself a stamp. Yay. And it was just a little thing, but I had made sure that I do that. So you must celebrate your accomplishments no matter what they are. Don't focus on the negative. Our brains will want to do that, but we have to learn to purposely choose to focus on the positive. Change your perspective on life through praise and worship, looking beyond ourselves. It says in the Bible, where does my help come from? I lift my eyes up, and literally purposely lifting your eyes up, noticing how God is and how great he is, and worship and all that kind of stuff. Socialize with people you enjoy being with, laugh, have fun, and do things for other people as well. Make sure you kind of have that in there. There's nothing, it's better to give than receive. There's something really amazing about, actually, I'm going to ring up that person today. I'm going to encourage them. I'm going to do this. It doesn't matter how big or small it is, but do things for other people. And then I would say, pump your brain with as much good things as you possibly can. With talks, listening to great podcasts, music, great books, Bible verses, meditate. We can meditate because we can worry. If you can worry, you can meditate. It's just a different form of focusing on something. Meditate on, stay in the presence, and then back yourself. Kind of say, I can do this. I'm going to get through this. And start focusing on what you can do rather than what you're feeling you can't do.
Wonderful. That's amazing. How can we support, Jules, somebody who is anxious?
Okay, so this is something that I feel as a church we can really make a difference in the world. One of the things I'm super passionate about is as a church community supporting one another and helping one another, and then also helping people who don't know God yet with their anxieties. So I'm really glad we're talking about this. First of all, we need to learn to be good listeners. I'm still working on being a good listener. You're doing very well this evening, all of you. Be a good listener. So when somebody's talking to you about their anxiety, I think a lot of us have the tendency to want to jump in and try and solve their problems straight away. And sometimes, as we've heard many times before, that people just want to talk. They want to talk it out. And that in itself can be quite healing for someone who's anxious. We have to learn how to have a good face, not to be shocked by what people may be saying, trying to be impassive, but compassionate as well at the same time. Because when people are able to talk about things, they're able to lay the burdens down. Sometimes when you're saying something out loud, you might actually be thinking, actually, I don't really believe that. So it helps someone get perspective as well. So when you're listening to someone, you're giving them eye contact, you're giving them attention, you're making them feel important, you're making them feel of value. A lot of people who feel anxious feel their value is down here. So even just by purposely kind of giving them attention, it's kind of, you're of value, you're of worth. What you've got to say is important. So be a good listener and help them lay their burdens down and let people talk. And then reassurance is good. So let people talk, but then also reassure them that some of you might never have suffered from anxiety. But I think one of the things you can do is by kind of saying, well, okay, I might not know how you feel, but you're not on your own in this. We're here to support you. You know, if you ever need someone to listen, I'll be here for you. Or we can, you can share it out. We can support you. For those of us who do have anxiety, we can say, well, I know how you feel. You're not on your own. You're not going mad. You know, all the things that we've just said. There's not something wrong with you. There is hope. We can find a way out of this. All of that kind of stuff. Encourage them. Be an encourager. Keep inviting people to things. So often people who get anxious like to avoid things. And they may say no a number of times to events or whatever you're inviting them to do, even if it's like just going out for a walk together. They may avoid it, and the tendency can be to feel a little bit rejected after a while. I had some very good friends who really stuck with me through the anxiety. I remember one of my very good friends saying to me, yeah, I've never suffered from anxiety, which is great. And I was like, thanks. But she says, I'm with you in it. I'm here with you. And that meant a lot to me. So, but I would sometimes just brush people off and go, I don't feel well enough today, or I'd cancel plans because I wasn't feeling great. But they kept, because people kept inviting me, I was like, okay, that's great. They're not going to hold it against me because I've not turned up. I don't want to feel guilty every time I see people. I already feel anxious. But if you're just very active in inviting people to things or ringing up, checking in, all that kind of stuff just goes such a long way. Remind people of their good qualities, because we often get lost in, I'm an anxious person or I have mental health issues. Remind them of their good qualities, even if it's like, I really like your shoes. It doesn't need to be anything amazing, but really kind of hone in of their good qualities. Be a supporter, not a rescuer. And many of us, as I've said, want to be a rescuer. We're empathetic, so we really want to help people. But we can't always rescue people. Often we have to be, if you want to get better, you have to almost make the decision in yourself. And sometimes people enable us to carry on being anxious. And that's not always helpful either, because we have to learn slowly but surely to stand on our own 2 feet and to be able to trust ourselves. So we can enable people and help, and it's not enable people, but support people in moving out in anxiety, but we need to be clear that we're not going to rescue them. So you can do that by, when somebody's saying, I feel really anxious about this scenario, you can say, well, what do you want to do about it? Rather than you coming in with, I think you should do this and this. What do you want to do about it? And then kind of almost saying, how is that behaviour going to help you in that scenario? There's a way of speaking to people which is looked at in transactional analysis, as some of you might have even heard about this, where we often take on roles in our lives when we're in conversations to people. And there's 3 kind of different roles. There's parent, adult, child. And sometimes we can act like children in certain relationships, even though you're an adult. So you might find yourself kind of feeling as though you can't speak your mind in a certain situation to this person because they almost have an authority over you, because they'll be like, oh, don't be silly. Oh, that's inconsequential. Or I think you should do this. I'm going to help you. I'm going to fix you. Do that. It's like a parent to a child. Or you might do it the other way around. But the best way of speaking to people and helping one another and building up self-esteem is adult to adults, rather than either being like a parent to someone or being like a child. So you're not going into the victim role, or you're not going into the kind of savior role, is adult to adults. And so that's very much like you very much are bringing that person who you're talking to into the decision-making process. So you're kind of saying, yeah, I'm listening to you, but what do you want to do? I'm willing to help you, but you're treating that person as an adult, thinking I can help you to help yourself, if that makes sense. There's some great books about transactional analysis if you want to look into that. So, yes. And if you feel also that somebody really isn't feeling well, or even if they're feeling mediumly okay, I think it's always worth kind of saying, have you been to see your doctor about this? Have you been to see a counsellor about this? They might be able to help you, and we'll go on to that in the next question. But, always refer to that we're here to support. Community helps massively, but we're not trying to take the place of healthcare professionals. We do always need to make sure that we're signposting to them as well.
This is such gold for us, so thank you. Really brilliant. Can you just tell us what any of your thoughts about different therapies and about medication? Okay,
so I've got a lot of the answers to this from my friend who's a GP, who has helped written a bit of the course. So Rona, she's absolutely brilliant. But she says when you go and see your GP, what they will do first of all is find out where you're at regarding your mental health. So they'll probably get you to fill in a questionnaire, and that's just really a gauge to find out where, what's going on and where you're at. And sometimes for you to be able to find out where you're at, it'll just be general questions. And the first thing a doctor will say to you is, let's look at your lifestyle. What do you need to cut out and what do you need to put in? And basically all the things that we need to cut out are probably the things that I've already mentioned that aren't helpful for us, like alcohol, cigarettes, what else? Any drug use, sugar, all of those things. Maybe if you're kind of overdosing on the news, cutting out things that are just not helpful for your mental well-being. And then they'll talk about what can you put in. So again, I've just mentioned a lot of it: exercise, good food, all that kind of stuff. Prioritizing sleep, and all the things that I've just mentioned. The main therapy that they will often offer you, a doctor will offer you, is cognitive behavioural therapy. I'm sure many of you have heard of this, and this has been proven to be an absolute winner for a lot of people, particularly regarding anxiety. And the way that works is that it deconstructs your thought patterns in a good way. So it helps you reframe the way you think about things and your perspectives, so that your thoughts are not producing the anxious feelings and in turn the behaviours. And CBT is really, really helpful. So that's a really, really good therapy. Often GPs will talk about meditation and mindfulness, some really good apps that you can get, which are like a Calm. What are the other ones? There's quite a few. There's a really, really good Christian one called Soul Time, which has got absolutely brilliant talks on it, really great meditations, really great Bible verses, everything to do with mental health. I would really highly recommend Soul Time. That's really, really good. And then what they might do, a GP might do is offer you medication. Now, there are certain medications that are sticking plasters that will kind of deal with the kind of physical effects of anxiety. So there was one in particular which are beta blockers, which are for the physical effects of circumstantial anxiety. So say if you're afraid of like going on a plane, they may give you some of these beta blockers, which will calm down the physical effects, the racing heart, all that kind of stuff. And enable you to feel as though you can get through the certain situations. But they would say they're more kind of sticking plaster type scenarios, and they're good, but they're not going to really totally help always change your mood. One of the things that they kind of sometimes also will prescribe is the SSRI drugs, which are serotonin reproducing drugs. So when we're anxious, the serotonin, which is the happy feeling drug in our brain, goes down. So we're feeling less and less able to face the challenges of the day. We feel as though life becomes overwhelming and things like that. So these particular drugs, which can be very, very helpful for mood stabilizing, they will help boost up your serotonin and help you feel as though you can face life and kind of start facing those challenges. So for me, when I went on citalopram for a couple of years, and that really helped me kind of, I wasn't having those massive kind of like spikes of anxiety. It kind of evened me out a little bit, and it helped me think a little bit clearer. It helped me feel as though life wasn't too much of a overwhelming thing, and then I gradually came off them. Some of us may, just because of our physiology, may have to stay on these because our brain chemistry is like that. And there's nothing wrong in that. It's just like, if there's a deficiency in your body, you might have to take a certain vitamin. It's sometimes these kind of medications can really help for just keeping you on that even keel, and there's no shame, no harm in that. That's just really, really helpful. And so I just came off them at the time because I felt as though it was the right time to do it. But it's very much the choice is yours, and you can talk that through with your doctor. So that's what usually a doctor will do. They'll offer CBT. And they will offer different lifestyle changes, like things that you can do. They'll probably give you some reading or some websites, and they will offer you these different medications as well. They may also kind of point you in the direction of certain different apps and things like that will be helpful.
Wonderful. Now this is our last question, and then we're going to see if anybody's got any questions. But what does the Bible have anything to say about anxiety, and how can we apply it?
No, it doesn't, I'm afraid. Sorry. No, you really do. It has loads to say. In fact, the more I kind of grow in this journey of understanding, the more I realize how much the Bible has to say about our mental health and well-being. It's just knowing how to use it. It's knowing how to renew your mind. In Psalms, I'm going to pick out a few verses, but there is so much out there, and there's lots of books written about it as well. So in Psalm 23, Jesus talks about, the Good Shepherd talks about restoring our soul. And in John 3, verse 21, 3 John, 3 John? There are 3 books of John, isn't there? 3 John 21 verse 2, it talks about when our soul prospers, our physical health prospers as well. So there's this real connection between our soul and our body. And in the 23rd Psalm, it talks about wanting to restore our soul. I often think our soul is the place where we have our thoughts, our emotions, our perceptions, our feelings, our sense of who we are is right in the core of our very being, and I see that as our soul. And Jesus talks about how he wants to restore our soul and lead us into green pastures to bring rest for our souls. So there's very much this sense that that God wants to do that. He wants there is a way to bring rest for our souls. That there's a sense of well-being. And then we all know that in the Bible it talks over and over again about not fearing. Do not fear, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. I think somebody once said there was 365 times, and then I read that wasn't right, and then I don't know. But we often are told not to be fearful, that God is with us, but we don't always know how to not be fearful. And then Jesus also talks about not worrying. Don't worry about tomorrow. Now, the interesting thing is that Jesus showed all sorts of different emotions in his life. He is our model of what it is to be fully at one with God and things like that. But he showed all these different emotions. He showed anger, he showed love, he showed compassion, he showed joy, all of those different things. But the one thing he told us to resist was fear and worry. So there is something very key about that if there is a command, Jesus is giving us a command, basically saying, and God's giving us a command, do not fear. Now, that's not to make us feel bad about ourselves if we worry or are anxious. It's more about the fact that we can, this is a journey that we're going on that we can get to. And that is our kind of baseline of we can become unfearful or worry less because he wants the best for us. Worrying and being fearful is not the best thing for us. So when he says don't worry about tomorrow, that's a really practical advice in the fact that we kind of, as I said earlier on, we can imagine what's going to go wrong in the future, but Jesus has actually given us this really great kind of advice. Just stay in the present, live one day at a time, and giving you enough strength for each day. I'm going to be with you. I'm never going to forsake you. I'm never going to leave you. I'm going to be with you all the way through this. And so this cognitive behavioral therapist said to me very early on, don't project ahead. And I was like, oh gosh, Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. And she says, well, yeah, that's basically a really good thing to do. Don't worry about tomorrow. Stay in the present. So that's one thing that Jesus talks about, not worrying. So there's that. In Proverbs 4 verse 23, it says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And also so that basically our heart is basically protecting what's going on inside of us. And a lot of our thoughts when we're anxious are a bit frantic and a bit all over the place, and we're just letting them go everywhere, and we kind of follow any kind of anxious thought all over the place. And actually, we can learn to put a guard on our thinking and kind of go, no, I don't need to think about that. I don't need to focus on that. We need to have kind of almost how you put boundaries and parameters in for our children. We need to start parenting and guarding our own thoughts as well, and learning kind of go, is this thought good for me? Is it true? Is it helpful? Can I do anything about it? Or do I need to go and focus on something else? So Proverbs 4 verse 20, and I use that quite a lot now. Am I guarding my heart by thinking this thing? And it's not like I'm living with rose-coloured spectacles on for the rest of my life and everything is beautiful and wonderful and denying the challenges. But when I flip over into this very negative spiral, I'm not guarding my heart. I'm not looking after it. So it's good to have that instruction, I think, for our own well-being. The classic verse, which is about anxiety, is from Philippians 4, verses 6 to 8. Don't be anxious about anything. Give everything to God. So it sounds simple, but it's harder than we think. But again, it's that instruction of try and avoid anxiety as much as we possibly can. And how do we do that? By giving things over to God and then practicing gratitude, being thankful. And this opens the door to the spiritual dynamic of freedom from anxiety. It opens the door to God's peace when we're being thankful, when we're trusting Him with things that we just cannot manage ourselves. When we choose to do that, God is so proud of us, because nothing pleases God more than faith. And I know as Christians, a lot of our lives are built around the fact, like, I want to be able to please God. I want to be able to, God says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. And we can use our mind to love God by saying, I am choosing to trust you in this scenario. I'm choosing to give this over to you. And I'm going to be thankful. And then it says God's peace comes in and it protects our hearts and minds. And then sometimes we kind of think, we forget the next bit of the verses, which goes on to verse 8. Then he says, then focus on something else. So if you read Philippians, it talks about focus on whatever is true, whatever is positive, whatever is praiseworthy, whatever is hopeful. Think of these things. And I remember when I read about this verse, when I saw this verse, I was like, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. Because sometimes as Christians, we feel as though we have to think about all the bad things that are going on in the world because we have to pray about them. And then that makes our mood go down and then we get more anxious. Or I have to think about that person who's going through all those bad things. And then we find our mood going down and our feelings going down and we feel more anxious, blah, blah, blah. But actually, when we're trying to cut down on the anxiety, we need to replace it with something else. And Philippians 4 verse 8 gives us this kind of framework. It says, focus on what is good. Focus on what is praiseworthy. Focus on what brings life, really. Because then we feel stronger and we feel able to face life's challenges. And then we can help other people as well. So I find that really, really helpful. Proverbs 23 verse 7, it says, as we think, so we are. So what we think about ourselves often manifests out in our lives. So make sure you're thinking good about yourself, thinking good about your life, thinking that God's always working a good work in us and He will bring it to completion. Just a couple more verses, but there's absolutely loads in there. 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5 talks about we have strongholds. There are spiritual strongholds. in our lives and in our thoughts. And a lot of these strongholds that stop us from moving forward are often in our thoughts. And Paul talks about how we can bring down those strongholds with these spiritual weapons that we've been given, which is faith and trust and all that kind of stuff, but bringing our thoughts into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So again, and one of the barometers that I use quite often now is this thought I'm thinking, does it fit in with what God thinks about me, what God thinks about my life, what God thinks about my future? And I found that when I kind of bring it back into obedience to Christ, I just feel a lot better. It just gives me that really great guard and parameter around me, and the stronghold of fear, it starts to be broken down as well. There's James 1 verse 2, rejoicing in trials, which how can you rejoice in trials? But there's something really extraordinary about when we come through difficult things. It helps us persevere and brings us on to maturity and builds our self-esteem and all that kind of stuff. So if we're going through some really rubbish stuff, I don't want to belittle that in any way, but always remember God can bring something really amazing out of this, and he can do something really amazing in you. And if we have perseverance and we have hope, there's nothing that can overcome us at all. John 16, verse 33, I have told you these things. Jesus is talking to his disciples before he goes to the cross. Before, the worst thing that could possibly happen to them. He's telling them that they can have peace because he's overcome the world. So when we feel overwhelmed by the world, remember Jesus says, I have overcome the world. Just use that as your shield. We're not the ones who have overcome the world. It's Jesus. Jesus is in us, so we can overcome every single difficulty that we have in our lives. We can become overcomers, and we can put our faith over our fear. So that's just a couple of verses, but there's loads.
That's absolutely brilliant, and thank you so much, because I just feel like you've given me, me personally, just listening to all of that, it's just so rich in ideas and in truth. Absolutely brilliant. So thank you. Let's give her a round of applause, shall we?